That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, probably in spot, you have to do extra chores.
That's about it. Closest to
I don't know, I'm not at the end and I still end up doing all the chores. Yes.
Okay. So again, we're gonna get in here. Do a little bit of the results policy. So Jolene, I'm gonna let you talk a little bit about this.
Sure. As part of the governance framework that we worked with on Dr. Schatz, we had put together, and we'll go through the governing board policies, the board executive director relationship policies, and the board or the executive director expectations. As we met with Patty recently, it felt like there was a little bit of a piece missing as part of that, and in looking at some other organizations and school districts, realized that this was kind of that piece that flows into kind of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis, as well as our operational plan for the board to help monitor. So these are the strategic anchors that are part of our updated strategic plan. And so they're in your binder. I think it's section 3 at the end, if you want to see them, but those are the pieces that will flow into the operation plan as well, that are really our long-term sort of goals.
Yeah, so again, this is new. And again, we had lunch with Patty for about 90 minutes. An hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes, just working through some things in our heads. And again, the desired results here, some of why we talked a little bit more above about where I got a little lengthy on those things to talk about, is so that when we get to these results, I think from a standpoint of understanding how our operational plan will flow, our internal work, and kind of rolling things up, you can kind of see that. I mean, high quality and targeted supports, we commit to high quality and meaningful programs and services, and enhance the educational system. And again, from what we talked about before, our advancing relationships, we talked about that, and our trust and the organization, the sustainability of some of the work with Cognia and internal development and investing in our employees, and do they have the right training, and building on those systems. We get deeper into our operational plan, and that will roll up into these results. Was that the understanding that we, from a board standpoint, that was the approach we should handle? I guess that's what the feedback we're looking for.
I think so.
Okay. All right. So then we're good there.
Yep, I think
I'm
the
good.
way he had it set up was actually one of the executive director relationship policies. The very last one was actually the strategic plan. And so that's where we had a lot of questions. We're trying to figure out how does that all fit as one, in the monitoring schedule was actually on the strategic plan really only. And so it was a good conversation, and I feel like this makes a lot more sense. We just had a little missing piece.
Operational plan.
Yes, so this.
There it is.
There it is. That's all you.
Don't worry about anything. Yeah.
I believe it's actually in section 5 of your binder, along with the other pieces from this meeting. So we haven't had an operational plan in the past. Certainly nearly all of our programs, obviously with grants and
Section 5.
It's just further back.
it's at the last section part. Oh, I didn't sneak into your office and give you one, sorry.
Oh,
I haven't.
I got left out. Okay, that's
Yeah,
all right.
sorry.
No, I know. Nathan.
Okay.
You're all right.
We haven't had a set operational plan. We've had various work plans. And then prior to having this governance piece, had sort of some strategic initiatives. And this was really our attempt to take the pieces of our strategic plan not list everything that we're planning to do this year, but what are some of those key pieces that we are going to focus on, key initiatives? And then how do we sort of plan that out for the year in an effort to reach our strategic plan? So I can also bring it up on the screen if that's better. I'm not sure how in depth we do have this as an action item to approve. That easy.
So is just having it in front of you, is that enough? Or do you want us to bring it up on the screen? We're good?
Okay.
All
Out
right,
of here.
all right, we'll just, you can just go from there. Yeah, well.
Sure.
So what would you like me to do with operate? You want me to go through it a little bit or?
Sure.
Are there? Here, hand me the sheets.
I guess in working with Dr. Schatz, this was something that he said that the board would approve on an annual basis. Is that the consensus? Okay.
Yep. And so again, in here, we looked at, there's a document that initially, it's kind of hard to explain all the loops and twists. and angles.
Gary? 2 copies?
Yeah.
Okay. Here.
We went through, but once we settled on the desired results and then kind of made this flow a little bit better. And so each one of each one of our areas with our desired results has some goals. And within that, each one of these goals that you just identified some key operational objectives, this responsible team, and then the indicators that we're going to use internally. And all the indicators aren't there, but I mean, there are a number of indicators and a more detailed operation.
I would say there's some pieces that still need to be kind of fleshed out. This is kind of our most recent, most updated draft. So within that, high quality and targeted supports, educator supports is one of the initiatives. And so the objective that we have is for many years talked about across our different teams and departments, how do we make sure that we have consistency in terms of our professional development offerings, whether that's the norms, the processes. We have a lot of processes in terms of how we do registration and deliver events, but in terms of how are we making sure that we have instructional and engagement strategies and having a lot of cross collaboration across those teams, specifically, I would say Jen, Carrie, and Keely's teams. So, and maybe Jen, you want to share a little bit while Carrie's out, but talked about sort of what does that model look across and make sure that we have consistency. We're making sure we're following adult learning strategies, things of that nature. So they have a PDPLC where the teams meet together. And so that would be a piece that is really in terms of an outcome, having that as a documented process, which as you recall from our Cognia visit, that was those were a lot of the things that we got dinged on was documented process. We maybe had a process or we had practices that we tended to follow. And we didn't necessarily always have something to point to that said, this is exactly it. We say, we all know what the things are, but they weren't documented.
So I guess I would look for feedback as you're reading it out. I'm going to make one more comment on something as an example, but as you're reading it, is this some of the things you anticipated? I know there's not a ton of detail there because I'm sure the level of the indicators, we wanted to have more discussion. But for example, when we go to page 3 on it, and we talk about long range sustainability, we look at the establishment and the implementation of that planning committee. And I know we have a slide on that. I don't know where that was.
A little bit later on.
A little bit
to talk
later
about
on.
that.
I
Yep.
mean, that's an example about, continually coming back and monitoring the process that we're making, what we're, how that's evolving, and then ultimately that will get established and, how we put it in here. I mean, how we outlined it, and when we talk about it a little bit later, it's where we're starting, but by the end of the year, when we monitor that and what we did, it's, you know, how we might want to change that process. Was it what we anticipated it to be or not to be, and how do we keep making it better? Again, that planning committee is, we're trying to engage not only the board, but others in a higher level of understanding of some of the financial and some of the processes within the organization going forward. Are there things that you may have been looking for or not looking for, those that
you want
use
us
this
to walk-
model a little bit more?
Or what would be helpful?
Measurable indicators. If there's no measurable indicator, there's no objective, period. So, and you should almost have dates with some of this stuff. Establish and implement the planning committee. If that could get established today, because it requires 2 people to be appointed. Do
That's
it.
part of what we're doing.
No,
No, that's good feedback, yes.
So for each of these indicators, we should, and it's not always easy, quite frankly. You may have some things that you cannot really find good data to use as an indicator. But it would be helpful to go, is this a year-long project? Or are we going to accomplish this in the 3rd quarter, 4th quarter of this year? Is it going to be in 2024? Because as we go forward under the governance model, I believe what we as a board need to be doing is looking for, okay, are we as an organization on track at meeting this objective that we have approved for this year's work plan, if that makes sense. And it's difficult. I mean, we've been using this approach in Fargo Public Schools for over 20 years, and we still have some objectives that do not have good measurable data points because of what they are, right? And because you have a very mobile population when you talk about K-12 education. You know,
I would say that many of the things that are in this are the establishment of a process. So they are going to be a finished product that's documented. A few may not be. The other thing is that we are looking at a project management software that will allow us to track the items on our strategic and operational plan. So in that place, we'll be able to figure out what the benchmark dates are, but we can add to this what the timeline is once we sort of work off of putting that in place. So I think that's the fact that we need to have to be accountable.
You have to have a place to start. And I think even as we started this process, the first year was just all establishment.
Yeah.
The second year, you're looking, okay, now we can start monitoring. The 3rd year is like, now you're evaluating the monitoring and the process.
Yeah.
So I
I
think
started with this like increase, and I was like, we don't have a thing to increase
yeah,
yet,
we
so.
have baseline data
Yeah.
before you can measure.
right.
But your point's well taken, Jim. Those are the discussions we were wrestling over about. You know, do we have enough indicators? You know, are the indicators deeper in our plan? How do we get the indicators into our into this document better? And again, we agree with that analogy. We're, again, the whole project management software we've been looking at and talking about, and you know, some of those internal systems, right? Because projects are all over our organization, and how do we internally build more capacity around this model too, so that people have a broader vision about it isn't just up here at the top here, that everybody understands why we're doing this at the end of the day. It's because the executive director has to answer the board in this model, and it's my job to bring those people together and create a system that reports up to that process.
And it all connects to your strategic plan. So it's
Yes.
all connected.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the 2023-2024 SCEC operational plan. As presented by the
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Heidi. Is there any discussion? I know this is a lot of work, and I think as we get going, they find that the first year stuff and the second year, you're like, oh, this is really gonna be very beneficial. All those in favor of approving the 2023-24 SEEK operational plan, say aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Jolene.
So then we want to take a look at the 2023-24 budget.
It is in section 5, but if you'd like, I can bring it up to the screen so it's bigger.
Section
good.
5.
Section 5. I will give you that one.
Huh?
You should have that one.
I'll have that one.
That's what I tried to.
So we did send out, I'm gonna let Brenna go over it a little bit. I will make note, I'll let Brenna go.
Okay.
I could, but it's just.
Well, the slide up here shows our funding streams by federal, state and private, which is about. Well, I guess it's not quite a third, but, yeah, so we're projecting about 9 million of revenue. With all the grants and then our general money. And that kind of increase, we kind of already talked about the childcare where contract came back twice as big. Over the next 24 months, we're gonna get about $4.6 million compared to the 2 million that we had the last contract with. There's a lot of state money that they want passed on to providers and shared service things that are going on. Julian already kind of talked about that. The other big piece is what we call phase 3 of SOR. Was another big chunk, about half a million will be spent in this fiscal year, kind of a few pieces on either side. Going through September 24. The changes to expenses, we did give increase of 5% across the board for standard of living. There's also a 6.88 health increase, a dental increase, and then PERS is going up in January for 1% for the employer contribution. And then we added 3 positions, which I think we talked about the literacy and the teaching and learning position, and we're trying to add an IT, which we have not hired yet, but is in the budget. So hopefully hire. So the documents you can see, it's a little different, and I don't know how close of attention you guys pay, but we kind of changed our departments at the top to, with our change of our org chart, to have the literacy come out of the student services. They were kind of buried together, or actually they were kind of half and half in teaching and learning and student services. So they've come out as their own project code an area now under Carrie. So I am kind of projecting still to have some carryover, which I try my very best to make sure the mutiny doesn't come back.
She's like, to not.
Well, it doesn't like the fact that I don't want to make a lot of money. I think there's something wrong. But and yeah, and then the other revenue summary report just kind of shows the specific funding streams. They're not probably, you don't probably see the $5,000 and under little things.
That's the breakout of that slide, right?
Yeah, that's the breakout of our.
Of the pie chart.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably already dated. Somebody's probably, got things moving again in the last week. So Carrie, she's laughing, so she probably does. But yeah, any questions on that?
So just make sure the membership dues, 32,000 of the entire revenue source is coming from school districts. Not
Yes, there's
0.6 million.
no 1,000 a piece.
But it's state aid too.
Yes,
Membership dues.
the state aid is different line item. That's on top.
But that comes from the schools too, really, doesn't it?
It comes from DPI.
Well, it's
Schools directly.
it's deducted from our revenues to the worksheet. There's a deduction on our revenue worksheet for our REAs.
Yeah, there's a bigger story there, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. I mean, you can look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, originally that money was outside. There was a pot of money outside, and then when they did that back in 2011, they just took that money and put it in there, but ultimately. If you had,
Because if we didn't belong to RA, we would get that money at the school.
you wouldn't get
No.
it. Yeah, we'll say it.
Yeah.
So it's not really our money then. It's
No.
not the school's money,
It's a
right?
school.
Yeah, you would get it. That's,
We wouldn't get it, we wouldn't get it if we didn't go out.
It's really-
that's intentional.
Taxpayers' money, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, I mean, you know, as times went on, you can, you know, when we talk about just the financial aid and the $32,000. What did we say? It's about 7% of our total budget now.
What?
The foundation aid and the membership. You know, it's probably
Yeah.
800,000 of 9 million, you know,
Yeah.
7 or 8% of our budget. So again, I think my point from the executive director position, right? You know, I mean, we talk about things that and when I say I mean all of our staff, but from my standpoint, you know, when I first started you know, it was always about sustainability. I mean, that was always something that was important to me. And so now if all of our state funding went away, we would still be an organization. We would still be able to sustain what we do. So that's a very important piece. And so again, we always appreciate having those dollars from the state. I think it's just part of that whole continued process of, you know, if you want us to be out there solving problems and trying to figure out solutions, you know, why as a state wouldn't we be invested in that too, if we're creating an organization for that purpose? It's like an investment for research and building a foundation. So philosophically, that's how I look at it.
So can I ask a question? Because
Anything.
we're gonna mention that we don't want to make money, but if you don't make money, we can't grow programs like the Medicaid program. I mean, because there are savings from those or the health insurance, that allows us to add more stuff to that. So to say, is this not a business? I mean, it's kind of a business on its own, right? No? You're a service industry
No,
business.
I agree with you.
So I don't know why.
That's
I
what
mean,
we
I'm not
did.
looking.
That's why
We're not-
in the black.
we're not.
We have
We're a
we have
semi-government
debate on that a little.
nonprofit. I mean, yes, we want to sustain our programs, but
We want to be someplace in the middle, right?
Yeah,
We want
I-
to have sustainability.
Well, I said I didn't want to make tons of money,
Right.
but if you don't make any extra money for next year, then you're just status quo. You can't really grow. So I mean, inefficiencies to me isn't making money. Efficiencies is doing it better with less resources, which you shouldn't be penalized for doing better with less resources than you are the government when you just spend every dollar because you can.
we don't do that. We are very efficient and we all have public servant jobs, but
Is fiscal.
there's a point where they could take the state aid because we keep showing that we don't.
And would you run this differently if you didn't have the state aid? Maybe that's my question. If you didn't have the $800,000, would this organization run any differently than it is now?
Yeah, I'd have $800,000 to make up.
Well, that's true, but
Okay, so it isn't just $800,000, keep in mind. It's $800,000 of free cash flow money. It isn't like,
Oh, I understand.
you know, I mean, so it is a lot of money because of how it comes to us.
Yes, it doesn't have an expense.
Doesn't have an expense to it, that's what.
But I'm gonna move this along.
Okay, all
I think
right,
we have to have a motion for budget approval,
Yes.
which I plan to make.
yes.
And I will move that we approve the 2023-24 budget as presented.
thank you for a second. All right, is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the budget, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, moving on to our bylaws.
Bylaws, help me with this one, Julie.
So as part of our governance process, we went through different, so the bylaws, we talked about this at the last meeting. To see if you wanted to visit about making any or I guess perhaps or so following the practice that is listed in the bylaws. One of the pieces in terms of the governing board, the selection of members and cooperating parties, it says. Each regional member of the governing board will be selected in a manner determined by the school boards of that region. And so I know that in terms of like the selection piece, that's sort of been a little ambiguous. And so just wanted to revisit that. We have went through the process of electing all of the members now, so you know, we're in line, but in terms of, term is up, following that process.
So technically, it's more done by, so I think one of the things I suggested in this discussion when Jolene and I were talking about it, she just had to refresh my memory. Matter determined by school boards or designee or something in there, meaning the superintendent.
Yes, and the next line, that the members must be elected members of school boards within the region which they're selected, or designate of the participating school districts.
Yeah, so up above though, are the school boards actually,
Right, so this says that for each of your regions, right, the school boards of all of the schools that are in your region are making the determination for you to be here versus.
so again,
Process.
it's okay with us how it's going.
Right.
It's just a matter of if you want to change the bylaws to align with what's happening. That's really what the question is.
And I don't know if we necessarily even need to, but just making sure folks are informed that ultimately it is the school boards of your region's determination. The engagement level, I'm sure varies.
And now you just seek out who's interested in doing, is that what?
Yeah,
Well, Mitch made a comment about a year or two ago, and he was absolutely right, is that the executive director was too much involved and that I just needed to place it on their plate, and instead of trying to enable the process, and they needed to figure it out amongst themselves, and I just needed to nudge them once in a while if they weren't doing it and stay out of it. And so we've done that over the last 2 years, so.
You could do without that sentence in there and still leave it the way that it is. I mean, you don't need each regional member through the yellow. You could just say governing board members must be elected by members of school boards within a region from which they're selected or designee. And if there's help of your director or the school boards, wouldn't that take care of that?
It's totally up to the board. We were just bringing it forward that we weren't following that
It's
practice.
kind of redundant.
And actually, I think we're following this right now. We just don't even know it because it says
You're
each
Yeah.
region is gonna determine it themselves. And each region has somebody here. How you all got determined was
Yeah.
decided by your region, I'm pretty sure.
Very true.
Huh.
Yeah. I think
I'm good with
And usually
it.
it's by default.
Yeah.
Because
It's-
nobody wants to.
We do not,
Except lead administrator.
Doesn't pay so well.
yeah, we just wanted to bring it forward. That was it.
I think
Okay.
it's fine.
Let's go on to the next.
the next one was, again, as we were going through our bylaws, realized that there is meant to be a lead administrator elect. The lead administrator is meant to serve a 2-year term. And then there's supposed to be alongside of them, lead administrator elect. Which we don't have. The other.
I don't
piece-
think that that's a bad thing. It's just that we don't do it. It's kind of like we always had an executive committee in there, but we just stopped doing it because we hadn't found a purpose yet, but we didn't want to pull it out because we may come back to it instead of.
Right. If we're not using it, I don't think you need to change it.
Yeah.
And I think then the other piece in bringing this up was to how can do we want to further define the lead administrator position?
And I think we can do that through the planning committee.
Okay. All right. So then that's
Okay.
good for there.
So do we don't need to reapprove our bylaws or anything each year?
No.
They're just good.
Nope, they're good.
Okay. Very good.
So we printed off all the sections of the governance model. So section 2 has the governing board policies. I don't think we need to go through them. We will go through the annual work plan that has the monitoring schedule here at the end. I forgot to bring it in, but I'll go grab it. There is, I think the code of conduct is one of the first policies. I have I think it's GP4. I have that page if board members want to sign that today. So I'll grab that. It must be on my desk. So just wanted to mention. What's that?
I saw them. They were sitting.
Oh, maybe they're back there. I don't remember. So just wanted to hand that out at the start of the year. GP4, a copy of it is on that next page on 28. And then we can move on to sort of the committee structure piece. Like Kyle said, we have an executive committee. It's not something that has been really recently used. And so as we talked about what the planning committee was going to do, we didn't know, we wanted to visit about the executive committee as well.
So Chris, let me
Go back.
just share a thought here, all right, real quickly, is that when we looked at this, the thought that came up, and again, you guys can determine what we need to do, obviously, is maybe this executive committee is an ad hoc committee more initially for emergencies or for things that are scoped out in there that are more, okay, we got 2 or 3 things we need to do this. Or the planning committee is the one that is the one that we implement this year at a higher level and again, so that's just, I don't know if we should look at them. This is the planning committee. This is the one that we're talking about, naming 2 board members today, and then we have had deeper discussions about this internally, how we see this going, and again, it's an ongoing process, right? So when we say how we see it going, it can go however the board wants it to go, but we're just trying to visualize in operationally. So that would be my feedback on it. Implement this one and leave the other one ad hoc a little bit more, but we can do them both too on a regular basis. You can go back to that executive committee one too. If they're in your, I think they're in your packet.
Yes, page 31 and 32.
Yeah. So that's for board discussion. I'll stay.
So has either of them been in operation before?
Years ago, the executive committee did work. That was really in the early stages, though, I believe, of the organization.
So then, and then operations is new.
Planning.
Planning is.
Planning
is
is
the-
new.
So if you flip over to planning committee, so, increase the board's knowledge of finance and long range planning. So that gets to be like that sustainability, how we, that's kind of the discussion we were having a little bit deeper in it, shows some more data in there. Again, just some administration and maintenance of the strategic plan. Maintaining a long-term financial plan, we talked about the 3.8 million, we talked about the innovation fund. Long-range facilities, I gave an example, I think at lunch we had with Patty, again, this is just brainstorming, right? But the Center of Distance Education, EduTech, us, we're looking for IT infrastructure support. Well, there's a lot of organizations that are bubble up around here, right? And it's like, so from a facility standpoint, I actually did it before we started here. Got here is I went out and asked them what they were doing and was their space and how they operate, and who pays and what they're paying. But maybe longer term, there's a longer term plan over, we have 5 more years on our lease, but there's a longer term plan of how you bring some of those under the same roof that could collaborate better and work together better. But again, that's just an example of some of the things that could be with a long-term range facility. So anyway, so that's the question in regards to what you want to do. This is the one that we think needs the most work right now. And gets us to where we are, our desired results about long-term sustainability, organization stability.
And then what are thoughts, anyone?
Are you ready to make your appointments so we can?
Well, what do you think of having the committee first?
Didn't we already adopt all these
Yes,
policies?
we did.
So it's not
Oh,
whether or not
sorry.
we're gonna
Yes.
create it. We already voted to have it. We just
The
gotta start it.
ad hoc, how we do the
Yeah.
executive committee is probably more about. But as far as the planning committee, I think, that would be the next step in.
Who would like to be appointed to the planning committee? To help in this great work.
Can I add that I think our initial thought was that we could either meet in between the board meetings, so on the off months, unless we felt like it was something that needed to be monthly. So just from a time commitment standpoint, virtually unless there were things of
higher. Maybe one superintendent, one board member, maybe, just to kind of.
So let me share one thought, just for consideration, all right? So we talked about redefining the lead administrator role a little bit. And part of that lead administrative role, start running out of. No, but seriously, in all seriousness, you know, we would like to see that lead administrator take a little bit more of a. Not generating the agenda, but a proactive approach in running the meeting for the superintendent meetings. And that would be beneficial for that lead administrator perhaps to be on this so that they get a little bit deeper understanding and so they could answer more questions directly. Instead of always the executive director, because then, you know, it shows a little more collaboration, I think, or depth of understanding of the organization. So as we looked at redefining that position, that was one of the thoughts that we had in regards to one of the appointees. Happens to be Justin at this point in time. Again, so that's just a consideration as you're thinking about that.
Question on that is, did I hear you say the lead administrator is appointed for 2 years? Then there's a lead administrator elect?
Yeah, we haven't done the elect position yet, but we could potentially.
But did I hear it right? It was only, so lead administrator for 2 years only though?
That was under the executive committee.
Oh, to be on the executive committee for 2 years.
I suppose they could be the
Okay.
same, but that was
Yeah.
under that group.
Yeah, again,
So I thought
it's,
2 years.
we could work through that
Each
process.
every board members, I mean, 2
2
years, it's.
Oh, okay, he
Took
can be
the term.
reappointed. Okay, he can be reappointed.
Yes.
then. Okay,
and
that's what I was wondering what the lead administrator elect would be, to sit there for
So,
6 years, 4 years. or-
right, part of me wonders.
Lifetime elect.
Part of me wonders if that almost should be more like how you have a past president. It seems odd that it's going to be, you know, unless it's just identifying that person to work.
But then we're gonna end up with, like Justin and I are from the same region, so
Right.
then we would like designate, like if Brittany's the lead administrator elect, then that region's gonna end up with 2 people in the next
Right,
shift.
and then technically that's 10 members of the, you know,
Yeah,
or unless someone
Yeah.
wears 2
I
hats.
wouldn't focus on that lead administrator elect.
Yeah.
I would just keep that on mind for the minutes there, but we don't.
That's all, Justin.
So Justin, you're. Something like to join Justin in serving on this group?
The school board member?
Heidi, how about you?
It's gotta be a board member of this board.
Yes, it has to be.
Doesn't have to
I knew
be-
that. I didn't know if I didn't, maybe misunderstood when you said should it be a superintendent and a school board member on them? Did you say that?
I just, if you're gonna have 2 people, I think it's nice to split it.
Although that's just, it's
not
in
gonna-
addition to the board chair, so Patty is already there. And just,
So, oh, we only need,
right?
so there's 3 of us then?
I think there's 3, isn't there?
Doesn't seem.
This it says,
Oh,
Just 2 board members,
I was.
but it could
was-
include,
but I just kind of figure that we end up being involved with all of it anyway, so.
yes.
I think that could be something to add though, because looking at the executive committee membership, it does say the chair
Yeah,
is a member.
it probably
So
is
maybe
something.
adding it.
Can we make those 2 committees 1 committee, just add the chair and past chair or whatever? Like there seems to be some carryover here anyway. Planning on coming board agendas is on an executive committee, and that's like, seems to be one of the main functions of this planning committee is looking at how you're gonna move things forward. I didn't say it specifically, but that's kind of the idea. You're gonna have to find agendas around that if that's how you're gonna look at long range issues.
Does that make a mileage change?
Yeah, so again, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, Chris. I just think so early in the process that from this framework standpoint, we should just try to follow it a little bit. And just if we may get there eventually. But again, it's up to you guys. I mean, I gave you my idea. I mean, I understand how this could be used a little bit more on an ad hoc standpoint, and it's easy for me to visualize the difference a little bit more.
And we don't want to have meetings just to have meetings, so.
No, that is
Yeah,
never our
I think
intention.
makes sense to leave that ad hoc. And this is sort of getting everybody on the same page, so it kind of bounce off ideas or directions to make sure we're on the same path as before we come to a board meeting.
Yeah. Right, and so there could be some things that are just recommended from this planning committee. Instead of me coming in and saying, this is what we want to do, this is where it was evaluated, assessed.
Or questions asked before you come to a
Yes.
board meeting so that it's not starting fresh in that when we get together.
Yep.
So do we decide if we need the chair? I mean, I'm happy to be a part of that too. I mean, I can be in addition to, but if Heidi and Justin want to start and then I can join you, be official members, would that be all right? Is everyone okay with that? There you go.
Yes.
So include me in that.
So do we need to make a motion and have those? You just
No,
appointed.
you
My
just
bad.
appointed.
Yep, no, you're good.
We're good. All right. What do you got next for us?
Hold it. I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the appointments made by our board chair, to the planning committee. Yep, it's and approved.
Second.
Hey, we got a first and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, same sign. We don't ever approve chair appointments.
Just don't let it.
I know I do see that. You're right. It does say it. It's by board.
I don't forget.
You're all good.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think we're on the same team.
So I just put up here, we're on, what are we on?
Number 7B, we won't go through, we'll go through the upcoming monitoring schedule for this section as well here at the end. So we'll go down to number 2.
So we're on number 2. So part of my evaluation was to put together, board executive director relationship policy, a professional one and a personal one. And again, so I kind of alluded to this earlier, you know, I put, again, I just fiddled with the words this morning, so when it reads good, create a greater understanding of the roles and responsibilities of the executive director. And I think that is kind of, you know, going to be my goal throughout the year, is just so that, again, I mean, it's the whole closer to the end than the beginning. And so as you start to evaluate the next time you hire an executive director, what do I really do, and what am I involved with, and how is the organization run? Because at some point in time, you may say, well, we don't want that in the next one, or we want that in the next one. And just trying to have a better understanding. And I'll give you an example of, as we would go through the process of monitoring this and putting a plan together, a little bit more detail. You know, it's just talking a little bit more about the revenue management side that I talked about. I mean, I spend a lot of time on the revenue. So how do we, I don't spend a lot of time on the expense side. I mean, I know that's what Brenna has.
What's that Brenna for?
Yep. I've always said I worry about the revenue side. And, but I want to share some of the things and what we do and philosophically what happens there. And then just go a little bit deeper into the role. And it's a little bit unique role. And I'll be honest, it's evolved quite a bit differently because I'm on the legislature. You're probably not going to have that the next time. But I think to show how those two roles have blended and the importance of how that position, the executive director, even though he or she would not be a legislator, what are some of the important things and relationships that need to happen long term in order to make the organization successful or have a better chance of being successful. So that's my professional goal. And then from a personal goal, I think it's just kind of embracing a new culture by advancing relationships with stakeholders. I think the whole evolution of education, this is as much internal as it is external, you know, really working internally about some of our internal systems and understanding people and where we are as a society with the culture of how we work and what we do and that work-life balance and then just advancing those relationships, which I really enjoy doing outside of the organization, and really understanding, you know, those systems and those societal challenges. Because as a shared service model, we can go anywhere. I mean, we can help people solve all kinds of problems. We have a lot of smart people here. It doesn't have to be related directly with education at all. I mean, there's people that need help all the time in solving problems. So again, those are my two goals. And as we go through the process of each meeting, I'll have a little tidbit on each one of them each time. And again, part of my personal goal is to recreate the history or to document and archive the history of the SEC. That probably didn't just seem to fit very good in there. It's more of I guess it is a personal goal, but Riley and I are going
I
to work
like
on
it,
that.
though.
Yeah, Riley and I are going to work on the archiving of the history of the organization.
We don't want to say that you're old,
No, I am.
but the next generation, when they look back, if they don't have you to sort of regurgitate that knowledge, so much of it is
Yeah.
lost. So I really like that idea.
It was kind of interesting that I serve on the Western Interstate Compact for Higher Education, and they celebrated their 75th anniversary. And they actually wrote a book and had pictures of the history of the organization and how it was formed in 1958 or 9 or 7. And they had a whole thing. It was 75 years. And that kind of what got the idea going a little bit. I had talked about it earlier, and then Riley and I got the document. We're going to try to follow some of that and work on that. So that'll be over the year. So, and you'll see in a little bit of the what I call a newsletter that nobody reads that Corey referred to. We tried to keep it short, right? But that was a good suggestion, Corey. I'm half joking. We're going to have a tidbit of history in each one of those, a snapshot in time. So each time I put it out, there'll be a little snapshot in there of something that happened along the way, whether it be 20 years ago, or it's actually the 20th anniversary. 2003 was the year our REA money was created. Devils Lake and Dickinson started it, so I put that in the first one. We didn't start Gateway until 2005. So those are the professional and personal goals. Need any feedback on that or any questions? Does it sound reasonable?
They're your goals.
Well, yeah, I just didn't,
Mhm.
very good.
And next you want to.
Next is the annual work plan. So the very first page of your binder, I think it's just touching base on with the government's framework. You have each of those policies set to be monitored throughout our board meetings. This is the schedule we come up with, trying to just kind of determine as the flow of the year happens, what pieces would sort of where. And so this would help guide our meetings for the year. Obviously open to feedback and suggestions. And the sense is probably as we go through it, we might have a sense that, oh, this is something we really should have waited for. This is something we could have moved earlier. We just kind of took a educated guess on where and tried to divide things out. So just wanted to, I think, more so attention to that. And if there's any feedback along those lines, get that from all of you.
Is there a calendar with dates in it, Joanne? Am I missing it?
The board meeting dates are on the front of your binder. I can put the dates, so right here, the very first before tab 1 should be this. The annual work plan. This is August, September. No?
I don't.
You don't have that one?
But I don't, maybe this is, maybe, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm on page. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, so we looked at this briefly. Jolene and I sat down and it was actually, I think after we had the lunch too.
It was.
We were talking
All makes
to
sense.
Patty and processing some of this. And we just went through and tried to even it out. And, obviously we can't monitor something that we're not ready to monitor, right? I mean, so we were trying to pick proper dates, things that made sense. So this may look, I don't want to say totally different, but this may look a lot the next year after we do it in first year. So this is how we landed on these based on some internal discussion and what we thought would work best and trying to have a balance between each meeting. Okay,
And then the page after that is the policy monitoring form that Dr. Schatz had given us. Not sure if there is feedback on process that you all use or anything different that's in place as part of that process.
That form states exactly what we need there.
Last is just the meeting schedule. The calendar invites may say 11:1, so an hour and a half seems sufficient though, so we can adjust.
Any questions on this or anything that we talked about or something that may be missing? Those that. Again, it's a journey this year on this.
Place to start.
We certainly, we want feedback or we
On the
want engagement.
Because it has been like.
Anyone else have any questions or concerns or are we adjourned?
Who we turning these into?
Julie?
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to sign one sheet, that's all done. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Finally.
Oh.
No.
Need a motion.
Lisa was on the slide.
That's exit or?
The other, Osage Arms Academy.
I called your judge.
Said that the right one? Yeah, it's not yours. That you had up earlier.
Many things they started already.
Said that, I said, okay. That
No,
was-
you're right. We almost said mutiny on my lawn.
Oh, I know. So, I'm trying to figure out which thing. Okay, yeah.
And then when I looked on here, I was like, oh, it is on here.
You were on the.
I was on the board.
You
So
probably
I
must
think
get all the extra email conversations.
It's no big deal. I just.
I could do it.
So I went and looked for it. I think everybody.
Well, what happens, you have to rate. all like that or have it-
Oh, it says they have Johnson.
After this, all of that. So we need to go.
So, got it.
You never have it, I actually have it.
I just didn't. No, that's okay. I'm gonna note it.
It's football. I don't One that was. Yep, in back. Once every few years.
Gonna work on bus routes.
Yeah, Brandon.
Yeah. 100. No, that's the same.
Like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right, Linda. Probably actually.
Yeah, that was weird.
But I, you know, it's got fine.
Okay, well,
It's
yeah.
nothing on my end, I'll figure
All
it
right.
out. Anything on my. Yeah, Chris told me that. What time do you? We're in the meeting. I'm like, okay, yeah, I've got it.
My kids are terrible. Right.
Actually, I started.
Not, if I had better. There are a couple of teachers. That I know my kids should take a class.
Oh, here.
I said, I'm very
So I was.
So you can't.
I think
join that?
He played Monday. Not good for him.
Not for him.
But it's not her budgeted. I mean, that was the answer I got. Right away. So we did get paid, but I not budgeted. 35 or 40.
Big deal.
Yeah.
Teaching.
Not covered by the. So I would say, I'm talking maybe not that much, but like, we're part of a small organized school. So we get like $30.
Oh.
There's a couple of waters, but it'll be enough.
Wait.
I can never really get it.
Yeah.
I don't do something. So they get this, the only reason that.
And it's, the green's really bad, so usually that's a really low.
Like,
Yeah.
It's like all.
yeah, if you're looking at for a year, if they would get, he wants his courses.
Right,
He
yeah,
wanted to
because
get
he-
time
he-
for
Yeah,
graduation.
he- but I want to.
Yeah, so you get about $3,000.
Yeah, 'cause
But I
he's
want to play basketball.
Yeah.
So
For
you're-
Jamestown,
Yeah.
so then you.
Yeah, hey.